Well, hello there. Happy Thursday. So glad you made your way to the sketch session tonight. Um, I'm lingering a little bit because I want to make sure that I'm actually popping up on both screens. So I'm not just talking into the ethers and nobody can hear me. Hope you had a great day, or if it's not been a great day, then I hope that you're ready to take a break from the not so great day by getting into your sketchbook with me. Okay, I can see myself on both screens. Excellent. Well, I sure know that I need a break today. I need this hour to just kind of shut everything out and just, scribble away. And I'm so glad that you're here with me so I don't have to do this all by myself. If you're coming across this video after the live is happening and you're finding the recording, welcome. My name is Carolyn Peters and I'm the owner of Kira Studios, which is a online platform where I teach classical drawing skills so artists can develop a really strong foundation to explore their creative voice from. And in line with that, I offer free weekly sketch sessions. They're a little bit longer than an hour. And these sketch sessions, I provide some beautiful subject matter for you to draw from, as well as a lesson, a certain focus that I bring to every lesson. So we always rotate through 4 different subject matters. It's like a cycle, a weekly cycle. It goes from figure to portrait to animals, which we're on tonight. Animals, we're doing raptors, in case you didn't see the headline. And the next week will be inanimate things. And as I said, with every sketch session, I bring a specific focus to it. And I do this for a very particular reason, because there's nothing wrong with just drawing for the hell of it. Just like, unwinding, drawing, doing the thing you're always doing. But if you want to grow your skill set, it's really useful to have that place that you can report to, that holds your feet to the fire a little bit, where you have to try out new things. You have to do things a little bit differently than you usually would do them, and you see somebody else doing them alongside with you. So that's the design behind these sketch sessions, and let me tell you how you can get the most out of them right away. So you can get the most out of these sessions by listening to the kind of explanation in the beginning, and then drawing alongside with me, because information by itself, if you're just passively kicking back, you'll absorb about 5%. So information by itself is a little bit worthless, but it's the implementation that will really ingrain it into your system. So I hope you have your pencils ready. I hope you got ballpoint pen, scrap piece of paper, whatever you got, and you're ready to put this insight into action right away. So good to see Chris. Hey Ted. Hey Dareth. Good to see you. So glad you're still drawing. All right, so as I said, we're doing animals tonight, in particular raptors. I have some awesome reference ready for us. And the focus is focus, as in, how do I decide what to focus on when I draw? And this is really useful if you ever run into this situation where you're drawing and then all of a sudden you get really frustrated because you feel like your drawing isn't going anywhere. Like it's either overloaded with detail or it's just kind of aimlessly meandering on the page, and you're just feeling like you're not really in the driver's seat of your own drawing. So tonight is addressing that. Just to kind of go back to the kind of poses we'll be drawing, I timed them. So the first ones are short 1-minute poses, just gestures to kind of get into the flow of things. And then we'll go from 1 minute to 5 minute to 10 minute, and we'll finish out with a 15 minute. So fairly brief, but again, I prefer brief drawings because they make you try things out, and then you're not invested that much. Like if it ends up in flames, then no big deal. You just toss it out and you do the next one. So let's get into the lesson. Now, there are 4 things that you need to consider when you want to be more intentional about what your drawing is about. And those 4 things, I'm going to mention them first, and then I'm going to go through them one by one, and you'll see that they're kind of interconnected. So the first thing that you want to consider is your time frame. How long do you have to draw the thing you want to draw? The second thing is your materials. First of all, what do you want to draw with? And what do you have available? You might not have everything available, like if you're out and about, let's say, and you only have a ballpoint pen in your pocket. The third thing is your subject matter. So whether you're working from a photograph or from a live model, your subject matter will offer itself or lend itself towards certain things and not so much towards others. And then the fourth thing that you'll want to consider is what's it for? Like, why are you drawing this drawing? So let's go through a scenario. Let's say you're out and about, you have your sketchbook with you like a good artist does, and you're sitting down at a cafe and you want to sketch the people around you. Now you have a real time confinement, right? Because you don't know when the person you're drawing, when they're going to get up and walk away, or when they're going to turn around and give you a stink eye, or whatever it might happen, right? So like when you have the time constraint, you may not want to use out your, you may not want to pull out your oil paints and start painting an oil painting, or use like this elaborate charcoal process where you have dust everywhere. Like if you have, let's say 10 seconds, 15 seconds, you better just use a marker or something quick, something that makes decisive marks for you. So that's one thing to consider. On the other hand, if you don't have a time constraint, like let's say you're out and about in the forest, and now you're sitting down and want to draw this tree. This tree isn't going to go anywhere. You have all the time in the world, but then you look in your backpack and you only have a ballpoint pen. Now that's going to constrict your choices, what you can focus on. Like if I only had a ballpoint pen, I probably wouldn't focus on strong contrast, because that's going to take a long time to build, or like on very gestural, expressive marks. Those are a little bit harder to get with a ballpoint pen. Now, if you have a brush pen in your pocket, now you can be expressive and bold. So you see, your material will dictate what you can focus on. And then the next thing is the subject matter. And this is probably what I will be talking about the most when we get into the drawing part of tonight. You want to kind of spend a minute before you start your drawing looking at your reference and kind of thinking about what's striking about this. Like, is the silhouette of this image the most striking thing? Or is really the texture popping out and that's something that you want to bring out? Or is it photographed in a way where you really get to understand the form of the animal, the person, whatever it is? And so once you have that figured out, then you can kind of direct your drawing to bring out those formal qualities. And the same is true, of course, like in a real life model situation. Sometimes the lighting on the model sucks, and so you don't want to then start rendering the values if you don't have a good lighting on the model. Like you might want to focus more on studying anatomy or studying the shape. So you see, like your subject matter will lend itself towards one thing and not so much towards another thing. And then my favorite question is, well, and what's it for? Like, why are we drawing this drawing? And some of the choices you might have is it for enjoyment? As in, like, like tonight for me, it would be, let me just unwind. Let me just like kind of ease out the anxiety and some tension. So I'm not going to put any like expectation on the drawing if that's my goal for the drawing. But if my goal for the drawing is, it's a commission piece, somebody wants to give me money for this, then I will set myself up and make sure I have the right material, I have the right amount of time, I have the right reference, you see? Or if I'm drawing for myself, but the intention is not to unwind, but the intention is to strengthen my skill set. Now I have to decide, well, what kind of element of the skill set do I want to strengthen? Volume, texture, lighting, and I'm going to pick one and then I'm going to practice that. So those are the 4 things that you want to kind of keep in mind. So if you want to have more on that, I invite you to get on my email list. And what you will get is like this very in-depth workbook that really helps you understand where you usually run into a roadblock with your own drawings. So it's called 3 Questions to Immediately Make Your Drawings Better. And the link for that is in the description below. All right, so let's dive in. I'm going to switch the scene so you can see the reference in my drawing board. And if you have questions as we go along, you can just put in the chat and let me know. I like knowing that I'm not the only one talking, thinking, drawing. And let's click this here. All right, so as I said, the first images are 1 minute, and then we'll get into some 5 minutes. Let's hit play. Okay, so for my gestures, what I'm focusing on is basically just getting used to the fact that I'm holding a pencil in my hand right now. Oh, and I need to get my head out of the way. I'm kind of switching over into drawing mode. And I want to attune myself to an intentional mark making. A mark making that's not timid, but also not, what's the word I'm looking for? What's the word I'm looking for? Like when you're just kind of being too cocky. So you want like that sweet spot between timid and drawing with chutzpah. And so I'm looking at, so whenever I draw gestures, whether it's a gesture of a figure or a gesture of an animal, I'm looking for the big shapes. I'm looking for the big rhythms. I'm kind of letting go of details. And I'm asking myself, like, what I'm currently drawing, does that capture the essence of whatever it is that I'm working on? And a lot of these beginning drawings are always looking shitty. They're just like nothing to write home about, especially if my mind is on other stuff or has been on other stuff throughout the day, and it just, like I'm kind of anticipating that these first drawings are just going to be kind of throwaway drawings. Not like I'm not trying to pay attention, not like I'm drawing recklessly, but I'm basically just giving myself a little bit of a grace period to sink into like my drawing brain. Most of these are unfinished, and I'm totally fine with that. So the cool thing about drawing gestures, I know that a lot of people get stressed out by gestures, it's like, I can't possibly draw something in a minute, and then they beat themselves up for that, and then they start hating gestures, and it's just like this big thing, like lots of drama, in their own heads. And the cool thing though about gestures, like you're not supposed to make a pretty drawing. I mean, they can become pretty like with time, but the cool thing with gestures is that they give you an opportunity to be bold. They give you an opportunity to make marks like you mean them. They give you an opportunity to see what happens if you don't have that much time, like how much can you strip away from your drawing and it still kind of looks like a bird. Oh, and by the way, Chris, I think it was you, right? You said that a hawk landed on your fence today. He knew. He's like, Chris, draw me. This is my chocolate side. I don't know if this is an English expression. In Germany, you say that you should draw somebody from their chocolate side, meaning like from their prettiest angle. So see, like in this gesture, I'm focusing on the rhythms. Like I see this neck rhythm visually flowing into the chest rhythm. I'm kind of emphasizing or kind of underlining the rhythm again with like the angle of the eyes. Not so much about the details in here. Okay, so now we're going to slow down, so 5 minutes, not a ton of time, but it's more time. So the pen I just used was a nylon brush tip pen marker, brush tip marker. So for this next one, let me go through this array of questions that I outlined for you earlier. I have 5 minutes, so you know, pencil is a good choice, or ball, or what's the other? Color pencil is another good choice. Ballpoint pen would be great, or even like a dipping pen for pen and ink would be great. But now I'm going to look at what does this image lend itself to. So the thing that I like about it is the shape. I like how the head and the body, what kind of shape they create. And I kind of like the blocky nature of the head. So you like that, huh? The chocolate side. So I'm gonna focus this drawing on first establishing the silhouette, and if I have time, I'll get into the 3D form of the head, the blockiness. Okay, and I'm gonna use pencil because pencil is easy for me to make adjustments to. Now, of course, if you're restricted by time, that might also restrict how big you draw. So when I focus on shape, so this is my blob phase. Let me zoom in a little bit. Let's see a little bigger. So I begin with a blob phase where I just kind of use you know, blobby shapes to decide how big do I want my drawing to be. And once I'm happy with that, then I switch into using angles. Now I did a whole sketch session where we just focused on shapes. It was another animal one, in fact, the one where we drew bears. So if you didn't catch that one yet, be sure to take a look. Where I kind of break how to get good, strong shapes down into a process. So the cool thing about angles is it lets you be really specific about what kind of shape you're drawing with. You're drawing. If you're only working with curves, you get very generalized, almost cartoony. And if cartoony is your goal, then keep going with curves. But if you want to be more specific and more realistic, then breaking things into angles is the golden ticket. Our brain is really good at calibrating where the edge of something, like the contour, where it's changing direction. Calibrating curves is very hard because curves, you know, it has millions of direction changes, but if you had to break it into just like 2 or 3 direction changes, that our brain is really good at. Okay, so at this phase, I have a pretty decent capture of the shape. I'm going to pause myself and kind of zoom out, and I'm noticing that my apex here, the high point of this part of the shape, it's a little bit too high for my liking. I want to bring that down. Since I'm focusing on shape, that's something I'm going to adjust. I'm not going to drive the drawing forward just to drive it forward. I'm going to remember what I said I was going to focus on and keep working on that. So how do you assess your shape? You have to actually zoom out. You zoom out and you look up and down or left or right, wherever your reference is, and kind of as you're zoomed out seeing the whole thing, then you compare. The mistake we tend to make when we're not paying attention is that we zoom into the current area that we were working on, and then we wonder why we can't see where we went wrong. Okay, so next one, let me pause this real quick so I can talk through my 4 points. Time, my 5 minutes. Materials, that means I could go, I'm gonna try some marker stuff. I'm gonna be crazy. I'm gonna go for some Copic markers with some liner over it. And so what does the subject lend itself toward? What's striking about this? Shape, it's not the most interesting shape. It's just kind of like, generic, ovally. But what is striking is that head, that face mask. And the other thing that's striking is the texture. So I'm going to see how the drawing develops, and then I'll make a choice halfway through the drawing if I'm going to focus on the face or on the texture of the feathers. So I'm working with a Copic marker here, kind of like a lighter value, and I'm using the brush tip of it. And I always begin general to more specific. So big shapes first, and then the more specific stuff, the details later. And the longer you can hold off on putting the detail stuff in, the better. Okay, so now what I'm noticing is, I'm kind of liking the Copic marker. It's lending itself toward explaining the texture, because I can use the side of it. So now I think I'm going to take this as my decision point of what I'm going to focus this drawing on. Because of my material and because of the subject matter, how I said earlier, I'm interested in the texture. So I'm going to see if I can work on bringing the texture out. I'm still going to draw the face, of course, but I'm not going to focus so much on making it kind of feel like it goes in. So since you might have other materials at hand, you might decide to focus on something else, right? And I'd love to see what your iteration of this reference came out like. Okay, so I'm gonna switch into the fine liner, not fine liner, it's like the felt tip marker. kind of like how the felt tip marker combines with the Copic marker. So when I'm focusing on this texture, I'm looking at big picture first. So like you can see this arc, you know, how the tips of the feathers kind of align on an arc. So that's what I'm kind of mapping out first. I'm kind of giving myself a few separations for some of the individual feathers. And I know you're holding pencils and stuff in your hand, but whenever later on, maybe if you set your pencil down for a sec, I'd love to know if you have a favorite raptor type. If you're an owl person, or if you're an eagle person, or falcon, or if you could care less. And by the way, just because you put a focus onto your drawing, it doesn't mean that you then cannot change your mind, because drawing is an organic process, and the further you get into the drawing, the more information you have, and it will affect how you keep moving through the rest of your drawing. So don't feel like, you know, you're bound to it. This one we're having 10 minutes for. So I'm going to make it just a little bit bigger because I enjoy how clear the form is on this one. So I'm going to focus on deconstructing this bird. So what that means is that I'm going to focus on form. I'm just choosing my material. I think I'm going to go with this charcoal here. So Dareth is an owl person. Awesome. Me too. In particular, I love these really small owls. So in Germany, where I grew up, we had, my parents have their house right next to a forest. And so at night we'd hear these little, I think in English they're called screech owls, but they're very small and they're very round and they're just the cutest thing. So those are definitely one of my favorite raptors. And I was really obsessed with raptors from an early age on. My dad, he's a bird breeder. Like that's his hobby. He breeds parrots. And I was always hounding him, why aren't you breeding raptors? Like, why can't we have like eagles and owls? And why do we have all these cockatoos? But raptors are a whole nother game to keep. But yeah, I was always fascinated by them. Chicken hawk, huh? Those are very common where I grew up. They're quite beautiful too. Okay, so on my drawing right now, I gotta scale down the head a little bit. I feel like that got out of control. Can't take it too much. So in my own decision-making process, I'm thinking, okay, what's this drawing for? Aside for, you know, hanging out with you guys, this drawing, I'm gonna pretend like I wanna learn about form. So like this would be an example for practicing something, practicing understanding form. So I'm going to deconstruct it and think through the individual forms. So we have like this kind of almost box-like head. Red-tailed hawks, yeah, those are definitely the California locals. So see how I'm kind of having a blocky head here? So I'm almost drawing like a actual box. And then that sits on top of a cone, a truncated cone for the neck. And then that sits on top of, let's say maybe like a truncated egg, a blocky truncated egg. And then for the legs, I'm running out of space here, so I'm going to put my legs here. The legs, they're more like little ice cream cones here, right? So you have a blocky head plus a truncated cone plus a truncated egg box plus an ice cream cone, and then we got to put the wings on top. So like having this information in the back of my head, with whatever time I have left, I'm gonna let that inform my drawing. And I did a more edited video on practicing drawing from imagination, where I go into deconstructing things. I highly recommend that one if you want to learn more about making your drawings look more three-dimensional and all that good stuff. So now, from having done this little boxy deconstruction, what I'm taking from here into here is this line. So this line is what's called a plane change, where the top of the head changes and becomes the front and the side. And I don't have to keep it like a line. I can actually, like, soften it up with some texture, but this indicates that there's something happening. There's something changing from this to that. And then from here, I'm taking this little part. So I'm not taking the whole cone, but I'm gonna focus, like, where can I see that? Or where can I see an element of the cone? Oh, okay, I can see how the neck feathers are touching and connecting with the body part. So we do these deconstructions, not so you can have block bird drawings, but so you can be more intentional about what elements of the reference you're giving voice to in your drawing, and which things you're canceling out. So if you've been drawing with me for a while, you know that I kind of look at these sketch sessions as a combination of it being a gym where you kind of get sweaty, and it's not something that you be proudly showing off to people, but it's like, it's a strengthener, right? But it's not pretty. And at the same time, it's also a little bit of a playground where you get to experiment in a safe environment where, if it goes horribly wrong, then no harm done. Nobody's none the wiser, and at least you now have figured out what happens if you do this, this, or this. So a combination between playground and workout room, where the goal is not to create beautiful drawings, but where the goal is to learn and to play. And I think in our culture, we're so damn focused on beautiful products and smoke and mirrors and pretending like we're perfect. And that's just not the case, you know. Practice is often not pretty. And anybody who practices a sport or a different art form like dance or music, you know that not every song sounds beautiful the first time you play it. And not every technique looks great when you first test it out. But the more you test it out, the more you tinker with it, the better you get. So this is, you know, these sketch sessions is us tinkering. So what I'm currently doing is I'm putting in some tone, but again, with the intention of kind of bringing out this idea that there's a certain form to this. There is the chest that's not being hit by light. There is the side that is being hit by light. So I'm still thinking about this kind of blocky, rounded egg box thing. But also, you know, knowing that this is a drawing where I'm unwinding a little bit. I'm kind of letting myself get interested in some just of the prettier parts of the drawing. Okay. Here we go. Sorry, I was kind of wanted to remind myself which other images I have coming up. Okay, so one more time, this owl with the crazy face mask. I'm gonna take a little while, so let's see how much time do we have for this one. I think it's another 10-minute one. Yep, another 10-minute one. So I'm just kind of roaming this drawing. I'm enjoying how this pencil worked. I'm enjoying how this is a Nero charcoal pencil. I enjoyed that, so I want to keep working with that. I find the face mask striking. I didn't focus on it last time, so I'm going to focus on those two things, using charcoal, focusing on the face mask, and so now I'm going to let myself dive in. So it doesn't take very long to, you know, run through your set of questions. And what's it for? I'm going to make this one about exploration. I'm going to say, okay, let's see what happens. So open-ended. So of course, if I give myself the permission to create an open-ended drawing, it might end up horribly. So, and that's fine. Like, that's just, you know, what exploration is. It's like you don't know yet where you're going, and you might be pleasantly surprised, or you might be horrified with what comes out. But if you agree to an exploration, you can't pretend to agree to an exploration and then insist on it turning out well. It just doesn't work. So here in my gesture phase, I reduced the owl into rhythms. So there's a big rhythm here, a big swooping rhythm here. I'm finding some sub-rhythms, and now I'm going to make this a bit more specific. So as I'm putting the eyes in, I'm trying to be mindful, okay, where's the center line and how far down is the top of the eye socket area. And there's the eye socket and the actual eyes, where there's a little bit of a difference between the two. And then here's something I'm noticing. So since I'm focusing on the face mask, I'm noticing that as I get close to the beak, there are these very wispy feathers. So that's an opportunity to imply the texture. If you were here for the hedgehog drawing where we focus on texture, you remember that you want to imply texture on the edge of the shape. So here I'm going to play with what I like about this material. The cool thing about these Cretacolor Nero pencils, or they're charcoal pencil, but they feel like a graphite. Like they're not as powdery as a regular charcoal. And so especially if you're heavy-handed and you just don't like that kind of chalky feel that a lot of charcoals have, I highly recommend this type. And even though it's still feels like, or even though it feels like a graphite, it retains the capacity to make these super rich darks that only charcoal can produce. Like if you ever wondered, why do people bother with charcoal? What's the big deal about this? Isn't it just like an old-fashioned thing and people should already get over it? The cool thing about charcoal is that it yields beautiful dark blacks that are kind of unrivaled by any of the other media. And so what I was doing here is like playing around with like pushing that darkness. So even though I said I was going to focus on the head, that's still in the back of my mind, but I do want to get the body in. I don't like having just disembodied animal parts, unless I just make it a head study. That's a different thing. I'm going to make myself come back now to the head. Maybe one of these days I can figure out how to put a timer, like a running stopwatch, as we're drawing, so we can get a better sense of how much time is left. But as it is right now, I don't know how to do that yet. Can't be that hard, but it all takes time to research that kind of stuff. Okay, so I'm looking at values right now, so I'm kind of squinting a little bit and kind of seeing where my darkest areas. So the darker I get in these eye sockets, the more they'll have that feeling of receding in. Even though the irises are fairly light in color, they're like this yellow. We don't want to leave it white. I'm losing the point on my pencil though, that's too bad. Again, I'm squinting to see what the value shapes are up to. Oh, hey there. Welcome to join the drawing party. Earlier I asked what your favorite raptor is. So if you just hopped on and you want to share, that's one of the questions that we talked about. So again, I'm squinting, I'm kind of zooming out, just so I can see, like the way I think of it is almost like it's puzzle pieces, value puzzle pieces. You see how next to the beak area, those whiter strips, those are my lighter value. Shapes. Hey Francis. Hope you got your pencils in hand. So with the last few, I don't know, again, I don't know how many seconds, minutes I have left. With the last time that I'll have, I'll start working on that kind of radiating pattern that's kind of happening around the eyes. Because again, my intention was to focus on the face, on that mask, to do so with charcoal within that 10-minute time frame. And when I have only 10 minutes, I'm totally okay with allowing my marks to be more sketchy and expressive. I think it's actually more interesting when the drawing has like some of these more squiggly lines in it, rather than being so super refined and controlled. Nothing wrong with a controlled drawing, don't get me wrong. But for, again, it all depends on how much time do you have left. Okay, let me make this smaller so you can see it better. It's this beautiful vulture. Oops. Oh, where'd it go? Hold on. There he is. Come back up here. Okay, so this one. That was witty. Harpy eagle. Oh, that's a good one. I like that. Okay, so for this one, I wanted to do some dipping pen and ink. So again, running through my 4 questions. Time frame is 10 minutes. Let me pause it real quick. Time frame is 10 minutes. I'm gonna pick dipping pen and ink and focus. So what does the subject lend itself toward? I'm kind of really into this top layer of feathers. I'm also into how these feathers create a pattern here. And then I'm also kind of interested in the head. So I'm finding that in the back of my head as I'm getting into the drawing. And what's the drawing for? Who's it for? Well, it's for me. It's to make a point for you. And I think I'm going to make it about practicing pen and ink. So that's what the drawing is for. So as I'm getting started with this, especially in this medium, it's much fainter. And I'm focusing on the big shapes. Again, if I have to reduce it down to the essence, what still says raptor? So coming back to how your choice of medium will affect what you can focus on. The cool thing about dipping pen and ink is that it's a little bit unpredictable, and sometimes you might have these happy or not so happy accidents, but it also lends like a more organic quality. So that's something you can lean into in your drawing and play around with. So if you were working with a micron pen, the fine liner, that kind of expressiveness, it's probably not something I'd be focusing on. Like if I had a micron fine liner, I'd be focusing on consistency and uniformity, just because you can control your mark so well with a fine liner. So Francis, I'll have to look up what a Utah raptor looks like, if that's a real thing. I haven't heard of those before. So the other thing about working in dipping pen and ink is that you want to draw like you mean it. And for me, sometimes that's the hardest part, especially when I'm demoing, because I do get self-conscious and like wonder about the result and if it's going to turn out horrible. But like those kind of thoughts, like at least for you when you're working on your own, maybe it's easier to control because you don't have an audience that you're worrying about. But like you want to have like the quality of your marks. They should be smooth and not like this. Like look at what I'm doing right now. I'm like backtracking the whole time. You want to go shoo, shoo, shoo. So that's kind of what you're aiming for. Oh, so it's a prehistoric thing. That's cool. It's like one of those terrifying things that would have ripped your head off. If you're near LA, and if we ever get to go back into museums, I highly recommend that you guys go to the tar pits. There's a museum there, and they have like all kinds of awesome skeletons. I think they have a woolly mammoth and just all kinds, and they have also a bunch of birds and stuff. So it's definitely a field trip, future field trip, if we can ever get out of pandemic land. Okay, so at this stage, I kind of have like a good layout or lay-in, and then I want to come back to my focus. So, and my focus was I was interested in these feathers and the pattern, the dark light pattern, so that's what I'm going to work on next. Something that I'm running into right now is when I'm sitting on a drawing board where it's slanted, and so it makes me hold my pen like this, and so the ink can't flow out. So that's why I'm kind of switching to holding it like that so the ink can rush down this way. So it's better to work in dipping pen and ink on a flat surface rather than on an incline. The incline is great for charcoal and such, but it's kind of like I'm struggling with that right now. So this is here, this first, oh okay, I'm missing one. So this is the first arc of feathers, the kind of light brown, and here is the white. And now we have a whole nother set that comes here. There we go. So if you want to build local value, so local value is a fancy way of saying color or inherent value. If you want to build local value with line, you want to hatch in just one direction. So that's also called a no-tan application of value. As opposed to going cross contour, where you make your marks going across the form. Those are marks that will build volume rather than value. And you can combine the two, of course. So I'm going to see if I can indicate the fact that this is white and this is tan. I'm hatching even more. I'm just trying to keep these marks straight. And so the more you push onto one of these traditional nibs, the more ink it will release. The lighter you push, the thinner of a line you get. Ran out of time. So this is the last one. This is a 15-minute pose. Great horned owl. I'll start it in just a second. I want to finish this up here. Okay, there we go. So you see how like I put this hatching on the parts that are brown and I left this white where the white parts were. Okay, so for this beauty, let me go through my questions. I have 15 minutes. I haven't decided which material yet, so let me think. What do I like about this? I love the head, I have to say. So I probably want to focus on some details in the head. So now I have to choose a material that will allow me to do that. So I'm thinking about going just with my graphite pencil. And hopefully it'll be dark enough for you guys to still see something. Okay. So generally when I begin my drawings, I do an overhand grip on the pencil. It's a little bit easier to get that full arm movement. For the gesture phase, and then when I get into the more specifics, especially if I'm drawing small, I'll switch over to holding it like I'm writing my name. So as you're laying in your gesture, you want to always stay zoomed out and connect the outermost part. So like if you go from the left ear to the left tail tip, what kind of angle do you get there? From the left tail tip to maybe that outermost point on the chest. From the chest to the right ear. So that's called the biggest enveloping shape. And in the beginning, I stay light because I don't quite know yet if where I'm placing things will be right or if I'll need to move it over. And if I get so heavy in my lines that I can't erase it, then, you know, I've drawn myself into a corner. And so you want to learn how to control the pressure of your pencil. And so what I do is, first of all, I grip really close to the tip if I want to have more control. The other thing is I use my knuckles and I rest them on the page and I drag my knuckles across the page to control how hard I touch down. Another little trick for controlling your pressure, how heavy your marks get, is that you pad your papers. So if you just have the paper on your wooden board and there's nothing in between, that's going to be really hard to control your marks. But if you have a whole pad of paper underneath it, then it makes it easier to control how dark your lines get. Also, having the right paper pencil combination helps. As I said earlier, charcoals, they're notoriously bold. So you want to be ready for it. You want to make sure you have the right paper for that too. Now, of course, everything comes with a caveat in art. It's very rare that we have, it's always like this kind of answers. There's always a caveat, there's always a exception. So of course, again, depending on your time, you might decide to make darker marks sooner than you would if you had 3 hours. Because if you don't make any dark marks, it's going to become boring. There's not going to be any oomph behind the drawing. So there's always a exception to any rule somebody tries to dish up. And the most useful question to come back to address that is, what's it for? What's it for? By when does it have to be done? And once you've kind of considered that, I feel like it kind of takes a real burden off of your shoulders. Like, well, I didn't have 3 hours. I only had 10 minutes, that is. Within 10 minutes, that's the best I could do. But if you're anything like me, you know, we can be so hard on ourselves. And that doesn't make it any easier to come back to the sketchbook if we're always beating ourselves up. So putting things in perspective, being realistic about your expectations and about the resources you have at hand, I think makes it much, much more enjoyable. So I'm having a good time with this face here. I'm trying to make it expressive and kind of get some of the details in. I'm starting to squint to look at some of the values. Again, when I say values, I mainly mean like value blocks, like big value shapes rather than individual gradations. Like when I squint, what value shapes do I see separating themselves out? So again, they have like this disc as well. And so the way I understand it, and if somebody is a raptor expert, please correct me, but I understand that the face discs that owls have, they help funnel the sound. But I might be wrong. But it's definitely a feature, like it's an inward cone leading to the eye, and that's what I'm visually trying to represent. And then I'm seeing, you know, if you're here earlier on and I was doing the form deconstruction, I'm starting to see the same thing. Like it has like this partial inverted cone for the neck. I'm seeing right here is where the feathers kind of do that overlap connection. So I'm gonna add that in. So you can see, like if you draw in that manner and you always bring a focus and you kind of stick with the subject matter for a while, that your first drawing will start to inform your last drawing. And while you're doing your first drawing, it might not feel that way. It might feel like, you know, you're just doing this isolated dumb drawing. But like if you keep sticking with it, you'll see how you are learning, and you're basically filing information away for a later use. He does look hangry. So this owl was at the school I used to go to and later teach at for 10 years. And I can't remember if it was once a year or once a semester, they had Animal Day. And they would have just, you know, all kinds of awesome animals come to campus. And this was the day they had an owl and a leopard. And this owl had it with us artists staring it down. And I think it was ready to go back home. So I have, let's see, how much did it say? I have about 5 minutes left for this drawing. So I'm gonna pause myself and kind of check in. So this is a good practice to kind of get in the habit of, like, if you have an intention for your drawing, you wanna check in, well, how's it going? So my intention for this one was to focus on the face and kind of to have fun. So right now, I feel like, yeah, I did focus on the face, but it's a little bit unresolved. So I'm gonna try if I can make it darker here at the tail and then kind of gradate up. Keep this fairly simple so this kind of more texture, detailed mark making can kind of stand out against it. So what I'm trying to say is, like, I'm trying to play something more simple against something a bit more complex. So if this is my focus, if this is a complex part, I need something more simple holding it up. See, if there's too many scribbles going on in here, I have two complex areas and they will fight each other. So again, a good practice is to squinting and zooming out, and then noticing what value puzzle pieces start to group together. Because the longer you stare into a value zone, the more your eye is going to do its thing, and the thing is it's going to let more information in, like the iris is going to open up more, or the pupil rather is going to open up more. I'm going to let more light in, and with that more light flooding into your eye, more information will become visible. But we don't always want more information. Sometimes to make a better drawing, we need less information. Okay, so you see, this is becoming now visually calmer. It's becoming visually less agitated, less interesting. So now I can kind of come back to this top area and kind of enjoy that more for what it is. Maybe some more details to it. So how do you bring your viewer's attention to something? Contrast is one thing. So if you have like a really nice rich dark against a light area, that will always draw attention. Color, if you have it. Small detailed shapes. Texture. Crisp edges. These are all tools that you can use to say, hey, look over here, look over here. Because you're in control, right? You're in charge. Like if you're a true artist, then you can control where people look. I mean, that's what cinematographers do with where they put their shapes. That's what photographers do. And that's what we artists do too. So we're not just copying machines who just have to make it look exactly like the way we see it. It would be so boring. We get to decide where we want people to look. All right, so the last one wasn't half bad, but if you go back to the beginning, there are some real doozies in there, as there always are. So let me switch back over. Alrighty, well, thank you for hanging out with me. Thanks for the honor of your presence. I'm glad we got to kind of dive into some drawing time, kind of forget about what's happening around us for a while and sharpening our skills. I want to summarize one last time the main core of the lesson, and that is, if you want to feel more in control of your drawing, if you don't want to feel like it's just kind of ending up the way it ends up, if you want to kind of drive it more towards a result that you feel like, you actually intentionally created that, the 4 things you have to consider is this. How much time do you have? Are you drawing an animal at the zoo that can turn around at any moment? Or are you working from a still life that is not going to change for the next 12 hours? Next thing, what materials do you have available, or what materials do you want to use? Again, if you want to use charcoal, then you might better set up a still life or draw from a tree rather than use an animal that's running around as a reference. So they kind of affect each other. The third thing, what's your subject matter? What does it lend itself towards exploring? Does it does it lend itself towards exploring the silhouette? Does it lend itself towards exploring texture? Or is it a beautiful lighting, and therefore you better get that charcoal so you can get the full value spectrum? And then last but definitely not least, what's it for? Is it for your own unwinding purposes? Then don't worry about the outcome. Just enjoy the fact that you're making marks on paper. Or is it about learning something, practicing, getting better? Then yes, get uncomfortable, try something new, risk it not working out, and focus on just something specific like the form, etc. Or is it for a client? Well, then you better make it look like the client wants it. So like that, you can stay in control. And again, if you don't already have it, get that workbook that I talked about earlier, 3 questions to make your drawings better. You get it when you get onto my email list as a thank you and welcome present, and it's really useful, and I think it's going to keep you feel more in charge of your own drawings. So next week we'll be back for inanimate things. I don't know yet what we're going to draw, so if you have requests, hit me up. You can connect with me on Instagram at Kira Studios, or if you are on my email list, you can just send me an email. But yeah, if you have requests, I'd be delighted to accommodate what you're itching to draw. And again, thanks for hanging out. Glad I didn't have to be by myself tonight, and I'll see you next week. Take care.